Hi, I'm John Underhill. Welcome back to Underhill Creations. So I'm in the shop today and I'm making a few more donation pens, and I started using Antler and it got me thinking. I should probably share with you guys some of the things I do with Antler, because not only do I turn pens with them, but a lot of times there's Antler pieces that aren't really usable. So I try to come up with new ways to use them so that I'm not just throwing them away. As you can see, sometimes when we find our antlers, and I like to walk and pick sheds up. And I start that in my area of Illinois. I usually start around February, and I'll walk the woods, the grass areas, around the field edges, whatnot, the main trails, and I'll look for shed antlers. Now the difference with a shed is the bottom is all naturally textured, and this is where it fell off the deer, and you can legally use these for anything. Make sure you check your state's laws or where you're at to make sure you're within the guidelines of the law if you're using antlers that came from a harvested animal, right? Somebody that a hunter maybe gave them to you, or if it was a roadkill, you want to make sure that you're not going to get yourself in trouble. So where I'm at here in Illinois, I can use shed antlers for just about anything. So I like to find them, but every now and then when you pick them up, things are wrong with them. Either they're goofy shaped, or maybe the mice or the squirrel have already found them and they started eating on parts of them. So you're not going to be able to use all of it like you want, so you have to kind of look at it and see what you can get out of it. Now obviously for pens, everything is nice and straight, and this works great. But when we start getting into maybe these smaller areas, these brow tines, or the tips, or even the base, a lot of times these main beams and bases can be so big, you really don't want to turn pens with them, because as you start turning them down, you're going to basically cut into that center bone marrow, and it's just not going to have the character that you want. So here's a few ideas for you on what I do with these antlers and how to get the most out of these pieces. All right, so let's talk about pens. Pens are probably the first thing that most wood turners are going to make out of antler because of the size of them. But before you get started, remember to wear your safety glasses and some sort of respirator. The fine particles in antler, especially when you're sanding it, can be very hazardous to your lungs, so make sure you protect yourself. All right, so the first thing you want to do, you want to have your setup. And for this case, I've got a Jacob's chuck with my Sierra 27/64 bit. And this is specifically just for antler, because antler will tear up a bit. It's kind of hard on them, so I designate this one just for drilling antler. I've also got a live center over here, and I like these centers because you can line up the tips to make sure that your lathe is set and square and level. This is important because we're going to be drilling this antler piece, and we need to know where these 2 points are going to meet. And that's exactly where our drill is going to travel. So next, I'm going to come in here, and you can see I've drawn a couple of lines on this antler, and that's where I want to start my holes, and these holes are where we're going to line this up. So I'm going to use a center punch, and I'm just going to come up here on top and put a small divot, and I'm going to do that on both sides. And that's going to give me my starting point here and here. And what this will ensure is, after I drill one side, I'm able to flip this, and because I have these points marked out and I start them on the same points, my drill bit should meet in the center. So what we're going to do is we're going to place our bit and our live center in those holes that we just popped. Just tighten it up a little bit to hold it, and we're going to come in here with pliers and hold the workpiece, and we're going to drill at a slow speed. There's no reason to generate a lot of heat. We're going to drill about halfway through, because we don't want the bit and the live center to meet. So now we're going to be able to flip this, come in from the other end, and our hole should meet in the center. This way, if we're off a little bit, we're off in the middle of the blank where we can take a rat tail file and smooth it out for our tube to go in. But we want our ends to be nice, because that's where we turn it down the thinnest. Now once we get the hole drilled and we know our brass tube fits in nicely, We'll come in here with a little bit of two-part epoxy. And this is the same process that you would use making any other type of pen. And just mix it up real quick. And I coat the inside from both edges. That way it will eliminate any breaking or cracking or blowouts. And then I take the tube, roll it in some epoxy. As I insert it, I spin it. That way I know I'm getting proper coverage. And I just kind of smooth it up the tube here. Use my finger, push the rest in. And I'm going to clean up any excess along the edges. I'm just going to make sure I don't get a lot on the outside. I blow it through the tube. Then I can come in here and just clean out the rest so that it doesn't cause a problem when it's time to turn. So now I'm going to let that cure overnight, and then tomorrow we'll be ready to turn it. Alright, so it's the next day. Our epoxy has fully cured, and now what we need to do is we need to mill this top down to the top of the tubes. So we have a couple options. One is if you have a reamer like this to clean out the excess epoxy. Unfortunately, this reamer is too small, so I can't use it, but this is what they look like. You can get them at specific diameters that will meet the inside of your tubes. If you don't have one of those, what I have is just a pair of scissors. And if you've seen my other videos, you realize all I do is place it in there and I push down on the top of this so that the tube lies flat along this edge, and then I rotate it, and what that does is it just removes any excess epoxy that's around the edge of the tube. And it may take you a couple times just to kind of rotate it. You don't want to do it so much that you stretch the tube out. You just want to clean it. And we'll do that on both sides, and then we'll take it to our drill press. Alright, so what I'm using on this one, I'm going to use a barrel trimmer. And basically what this does is I hold my piece, I slide the tube over there, I put a piece of wood under it, that way it allows me to remove this quickly. But I'm going to turn on the drill press and lower this in, and that is just going to smooth out the top of this antler piece, so that way we're able to turn it and get a nice flat edge for our pen edge. And that's it. Now we're ready to, we'll do the other side, and then we'll be ready to put this on the lathe. Had we not scraped that excess epoxy out, what would happen is it would get hot and it would essentially glue the tube and blank to our shaft here, and then we'd be fighting to get it off. So always make sure you clean out the excess epoxy. So here we have our blank mounted to the lathe, and I'm using standard bushings and mandrel like I would for any wood project, but I'm using carbide because Antler's pretty hard, and carbide cuts it very easily. I also sand it like I would any wood project. Light sanding, make sure you use a dust collector and respirator, but it polishes up nicely on its own and rarely needs any kind of a finish. You can also have fun segmenting Antler pieces, whether they're in resin or to wood and metal, but sky's the limit. For key rings, it's really simple, right? You want to start with a flat surface. So in this case, I'm going to take this textured brow tine, and I want to just make sure that I cut it straight, so that way when I mount the ring on it, everything is flat, and it also makes it a little easier for drilling. So I use a piece of wood with a hole in it, and this allows me to kind of hold that piece. As you can see, this block has been used several times, but it allows me to hold that antler, that small piece, a little easier without it falling over or my fingers getting in the way. And I'm just drilling a 7mm hole. And in this case, what we're going to do is use some two-part epoxy, and I'm going to just epoxy a piece of 7mm brass tube in it. I don't need the whole piece, so oftentimes I'm using small sections. But in this case, I'm going to use standard epoxy that we would for any of our pen kits. And I'm going to just make sure I get it mixed up real well. You don't need a lot, just enough to fill that hole, but you want to make sure you drill that hole at least, I like to go a 1/2 inch to 3/4, and that way it gives me more than enough room to assemble this when I'm through. But also, if I get any epoxy that builds up in the bottom of the hole, it doesn't stop my my final piece that I press in from seating properly. So as I insert this brass tube, I spin it and I make sure I get good adequate coverage, and then I basically set it and leave it overnight, and that way it gives that resin plenty of time to cure. So the next day I'm going to trim that scrap piece of brass tube off, level with the top of the antler, and then what we're going to do is take that to the belt sander, and all I want to do is remove them sharp, rough edges from cutting it. And it's real simple. I just roll it on the belt sander. Whatever grit you have is probably going to be fine. I think that was probably a 180 grit, and it's just nice because it gives it more of a clean look, and it gives it a little bit of a contrast as you start to expose that lighter inner edge. But basically all you want to do is smooth it off, so that way nobody's getting cut or ripping anything. And here I'm just going to remove the burr off the edge of the brass tube, and it makes it easier to assemble and press in this final finial. So I'm going to use some blue Loctite, and that's just going to set up and hold everything nice and firmly. And in this case, I'm going to orientate the top so that the ring faces the direction I want, and I'm using an arbor press here just to seat that. Now if you had a hard time holding the antler straight up, you could use that block of wood with the holes in it, the same as drilling. In this case the antler was fairly straight, so it went on nice. And once your key ring is put in place, you're done. For the very bottom of the shed antler, another thing you can do is make the chain pulls. And you do this by basically doing the same thing that you did on the keychains. You drill down, epoxy a tube in, and press this piece on. It's pretty simple. If you drill deep enough, you can use a punch rod with a little bit of tape on it and kind of use it as a kind of a jam chuck, so to speak. All right, so here I've got my chuck in, my long jaws, and I've got a center punch rod from my punch set. It matches the inner diameter of the 7mm tube. I just put a little piece of tape over it. Not a lot, just enough to kind of help hold it. And then I'm gonna push the antler over the top of it. It usually pushes up the rod, isn't a big deal, but it's just enough to kind of hold it there. And now I'm using my turn between centers live mandrel, and I put a Delrin bushing over top of any bushing, just so that the bushing, the Delrin sticks out past the metal. And I use that to kind of come in here and apply a little bit of pressure on it. And then I'm going to use carbide and turn this down. Alright, so after you get it turned and sanded to the shape you want, and I like to leave a lot of natural texture on this, then what you're going to do is assemble it. Now what I've done, I've taken a block of wood, just a scrap piece of wood, I've drilled a hole in it, 7mm hole, and then I came in on the side and drilled to connect it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the hole is large enough that it allows me to put the chain through. So what you have to do is this, you have to take the chain end off, and you have to put the chain through the cap and then connect this back on it. That way your chain is permanently inside, so when you pull on this, nothing happens, it doesn't come out. And unfortunately you have to assemble it this way with the chain attached because you can't get into it because there's no bottom hole. So I take a little bit of Loctite and put in the hole, and then I place the chain over it, start it out best I can, and then I feed this into the hole so that the chain comes out the side. Now I can use this to press on without the chain getting in the way. And there we have it. So bottle openers are fun to make, especially when you have these very large pieces of antler. And in this case, what I'm going to do first is round over that edge where I cut the brow tine off for the key ring. And that way I get a good grip in my hand, and I can figure out what feels right and where I want to cut it off for the end of the bottle opener. And I do this on the bandsaw. The worst part about Antler is it has a strong odor and kind of smells. So after I cut it to length, then I just take it to the belt sander and disc sander, and I just kind of clean up that cut. I want to make sure it's a nice smooth surface with no teeth marks in it. And then I want to go to the drill press, and I'm going to mark the depth of the hole I want to drill. And so I just put a Sharpie mark on this, and I'm going to drill my hole, and this is a 12.5 millimeter hole. And this will fit that knurled insert more snug than a 1/2 inch. And as you can see now, I'm going to epoxy this knurled thread in, but if you notice, the threads on that bottle opener are longer than the knurl piece that we're putting in. So what you have to do is pay attention to your projects. And in this case, I went and drilled a smaller hole, just slightly larger than the threads on that bottle opener, and I drilled it deeper in the center of the hole, the 12 millimeter hole, or the 12.5 millimeter hole that fits the insert. So I'm using our standard 2-part epoxy, and what I want to do now is I put the threads on this piece as I insert it. That way it allows me to line it up where I want it to thread, so it's in the right angle that fits good in the hand. And once I've pressed it into where it won't move, I'll unscrew that piece and I'll get the finished bottle opener off of there so that I can finish pressing in the rest of this threaded insert. And in this case, because it's a 12.5 millimeter, it's a little snug, which I like. It allows me to tap it in and it's not going to float around or move on me. I'll let that sit for a little bit, but because I'm not going to put it to use right away, I don't have to wait till overnight. So I wipe off the excess and then I take it straight to the belt sander and I just work that edge. And all I want to do is again remove any sharpness and kind of roll it over, give it a finished look, so to speak. It may take you a few times, but I change the angle until I get a nice rounded edge. After that, I'll clean it up because as you can see, there's a lot of natural texture on this Antler piece. So I want to make sure I get any sanding debris or anything out of it that shouldn't be. And then I can just lightly buff it on the buffing wheel. And how shiny you want it or the finish that you want to put on is your choice. I know some people like to spray it with lacquer. Antler polishes up very nicely on its own. So here for the final assembly, I put a rubber O-ring on it, and what that'll do is it'll kind of give me a tight seal on the end of it, and it allows it to snug on there a little tighter without loosening with vibration. Here's a few other things I've made with Antler. You can have a lot of fun using up the scrap pieces. As always, I appreciate you stopping by. If you have any questions, please reach out. I appreciate your comments. And be sure to give me a thumbs up if you like what you've seen. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos here at Underhill Creations. I'm John. Thanks for stopping by.